A lot of junior Formula stuff out at the minute, but it's the build up to the season, and I really wanted to do something as I've not covered junior Formulas for a while. So, at some point of this next week, what I'm hoping to do is release some videos covering both Formula 3, Formula 2, and of course Formula 1 before the season starts. What I came up across as an idea a few weeks back. I was doing a thing with Ollie from TGS F1 where obviously he has his 10 in 10 that he's doing at the moment, like I've Alfa Romeo, and it struck me as doing a 10-minute section where it's controlled and you have to try and talk in that period stops things from getting a bit carried away and out of hand, which tends to be something I'm occasionally guilty of. So if I'm trying to get these videos done, that seems like a good place to start. So, first things first, planning on talking about Formula 3. So, if anyone can see on there, I have my 10-minute timer set, and it is going now. So, Formula 3. Talking about drivers in it, let's first start with the Prema guys. Oscar Piastri, of course, won Formula Renault Euro Cup last year. Very talented guy. He's also raced, I think it was his second season in that. He's also, of course, raced in British F4. And going in at Prema, especially being part of the Renault Academy and coming in off the back of winning a title, it's just it puts him in a very strong position to do quite well in that championship. But Prema are the top team, and right next door to him, you've got Frederick Vesti, who won the Formula European Regional Championship last year, and it wasn't a close run thing either. So he's also another very strong contender for the championship at that team. Logan Sargent competed in British Formula 4. He's also was in Blancpain Formula Renault Euro Cup, and he went in as a rookie in that championship and took some wins. He was looking pretty decent. I think if it hadn't been for Christian Lundgaard in there that year, he could have ended up top rookie. But last year he was at Carlin and they didn't get on top of the car very well, so his representative performances were not perhaps where you might expect them to be. But second year in the season, most experienced with the car out of the drivers in the Prema team, and Prema team are top outfit. So if they're on form, fully expect him to be fighting for wins and podiums as well. There's not a weak driver in that lineup. Moving on to High Tech now, which was the team that ran Prema closest last year. Sort of similar to Logan Sargent to a certain extent. You've got Max Futrell. He's weirdly, perhaps in the High Tech outfit, he seems to be the one people are talking about least. But he's a British F4 champion. He, in his second year in Formula Renault Euro Cup, he won that title. He had been top rookie the year before. And he seems a nice guy. One a couple of times I've run into him. So I genuinely think he's actually in with a shout. If High Tech can get as good a handle on the car as Prema have, then I genuinely think he's in with as good a shot as any of the others in those two teams. But he is teammates with both Liam Lawson and Dennis Sauger, and those two very highly rated, very highly thought of and fancied Red Bull juniors. So they've got form as well. Liam Lawson was second in ADAC a few years ago, I think it was. He managed to beat Marcus Armstrong to the Toyota Racing Series, marginal, very, very marginal, 2 years ago. Last year, the problem is he was with MP Motorsport last year, and I never like to knock MP Motorsport because they're a proper race team. You know, they go out to compete and for the love of racing, which I'd always like and always have time for. But they're not a team which you're necessarily going to win too many titles with. Whereas this year, stepping up to High Tech, especially in his second season, you've got to fancy him as being certainly a contender for the title. Previous form shows, he's good for it. He can compete at the front. Then you've got Dennis Hauger. He's the other Red Bull Junior there. He's the rookie in the team. But he comes in, he's got a seriously good pedigree. Came second in ADAC F4 last year, won the Italian F4 title. He's been competitive in the other things he's raced in. He's got a serious amount of wins across the various formulas he's raced in. So you can't rule him out. The thing is, you'd say top rookie potentially until you get to the IoT team. And the guy everyone is talking about as potential champion in F3 because he's not been beaten to a title, Matteo Pacher. And won ADAC last year. It's French F4 champion as well. And he is the person that people are talking about the most. He's just knocking titles off at a canter. Him and Dennis Hauger actually are both very young guys still. So if they don't quite get it right this year, then obviously they've got time to build up in the future. But obviously momentum is momentum, and it doesn't can take one bad season to derail you. But people are fancying him, If they're putting money on it, there's a lot of people putting their bets behind him. ALT have at the top of what I'd consider the top three teams, they've got arguably the weakest driver lineup, because other than him, the next guy they've got in line is Alexis Smolia, who finished third in Formula Renault last year and had some really decent performances, but it tended to be when he was hot, when he wasn't. And I don't think he's consistent enough to really challenge for the F3 title. But then I could be wrong, because, nobody expected Nikita Mazepin to be challenging for a title the other year, and he managed to. So, different drivers react differently to different cars. He may surprise us. Moving on past that, because I'm not even going to bother with the other guy in the IoT. At HWA Race Labs, last year they looked on the verge of getting into the top three teams, and Jake Hughes was regularly fighting it out with them. So he's there for another year. I mean, absolute veteran compared in terms of age to the other guys, but then he came to racing late. But because he was with the team last year and he knows the car and he knows the team, he basically serves as a very good benchmark for the others. The other two being Enzo Fittipaldi, Ferrari Junior since the end of 2016. So, respected and liked within there. He finished second to Frederick Vesti last year in European Formula Regional and was competitive. I think when he learns the car, he'll run decently. Whether he'll be able to compete for... I can't see him winning the title though, I mean, Ferrari Junior, I always like to sort of back them and try and sort of think, maybe they can do it. But quite honestly, I'd be surprised if he's within the top 5 or 6 in the championship. And nothing against him, but it's very competitive at the sharp end. And the other guy in the HWA Race Labs team, Jack Doohan. Again, Red Bull Junior. Seems to be hit and miss. People have differing opinions on him. He is clearly a talented guy, but compared to the other 3 Red Bull Juniors that are in there, is he missing that little bit for a title? I don't know. Him and Dennis Hauger were in British F4 the other year, and it was like Dennis Hauger finished higher in the main championship, and Jack Doohan finished higher in the rookie championship. I've heard it suggested that Dennis Hauger is perhaps the more measured guy. He's not quite so likely to go for that rash move, whereas Jack Doohan may be more akin to a sort of dive up the inside. Again, I mean, you'd fancy Dennis over Jack just because High Tech probably have the edge over HWA Race Labs. But it's margins, it's slim margins at this point. Teams after that, you've got Charus Racing Systems. the most interesting one there is Igor Fraga, who of course is the other guy in the Red Bull Junior program, who's had the weirdest run into top level racing possibly imaginable. I don't really know enough about his junior career beyond he was apparently doing like racing, but the money ran out, as these things tend to have a habit of doing, unfortunately, unless you're properly minted. But he then ended up racing online racing and got good enough at that, you know, his dad begged, borrowed, stole, talked to anyone worth talking to try and get him back into proper racing again. And since then, Formula Regional last year, he was properly battling with Enzo Fittipaldi for a large part of the season, and then went over to race in TRS Toyota Racing Series and actually won that, which not many people were expecting, perhaps. So he's older than a lot of the other drivers in it, just because of the route he had to take to get into there. But he's very much the poster child for, you know, people who've not been able to go racing for a while, so they've had to come in through different routes. Or it's like, if he can get to the top flight, he's like, you know, almost proof positive that you don't have to be loaded to necessarily find your way up. There are other avenues available that you can explore, you know, that you can get your name known. So I still had rather a lot of drivers on here that I could have been talking about. Quickly, other people worthy of note. Inam Ahmed, I've got to mention him because I've followed him since 2016. I think he is genuinely a very talented guy, and I'm liking to see him back on a properly competitive grid again. I know he raced in Japanese F3 last year, but change of culture, jump around, didn't even know if he was going to be racing 2 months prior to that, so very disjointed season for him. So knowing a bit more about what he's going to be doing this year, got to be good for him. Clement Novalak again, and the Carlin. If Carlin can actually get on top of the car this year, those two have got a chance. And the other guy I'm going to talk about is Richard Verschoor, who, again, I've been following for a number of years. He should really be racing an F2. But after basically getting dropped by Red Bull, I think he's just suffered some quite severe budgetary restraints that have sort of stopped him necessarily from regressing as much as he should have done. Such is the way with these things. I can't necessarily... Honestly, I'd have difficulty picking a top 6 or what order they were going to end up in, because I like so many of these drivers and there's some proper talent at the sharp end of it. So I'll cut it down to basically the top 6 or so, which is going to be Piastri, Vesti and Sargent. They're all racing for Prema. There's no way Prema are going to drop the ball so badly. Their drivers are not going to be at the sharp end. Similar with High Tech, Max Futrell, second year, and he is multiple champion in other series, so you can't rule him out. Leon Lawson, Dennis Hauger, again, proper top talents. Theo Pourchaire, who everyone's money seems to be on. Igor Fraga, possibly. Jake Dennis? Wow, that's a blast from the past. Jake Hughes, possibly. So, and I'd love to see an Ahmed up there racing as well, and Richard Verschoor, because, as I said, there's so many names and so many people I'm looking forward to seeing on track. But the whole reason I set the timer was to try and shorten this video. So I'm going to stop now and say... I want to see Max do it. I want to see Max Futrell win. He probably won't, but because it's a quality grid. But I'm going to say Max because he's good. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Bye bye. Have your own opinions as well if anyone wants to say in the comments who they think, because I'm pretty sure they'll probably disagree with what I said. But thank you anyway. Bye bye. Bye.